Welcome to Chapter 5, Diagnostics of the Subaru Lineartronic Generation 1 CVT transmission. In this chapter you'll learn about bulletin searches, global scan, battery and charging systems, scan data information, specifically during the test drive, PID lists, transmission code lists, common failures, issues, system resets, and relearn procedures. My name is Jared Warren, and I'll be your host. It's a great day to fix transmissions, so let's get started. Always, and I repeat, always do a bulletin search for TSBs and ATRA bulletins. I also like going to a quick Google search and see what comes up. Many times the Google search has got me pointed in the right direction quickly, along with the ATRA bulletins and TSBs. Make sure you focus on the customer's complaint first and also inspect the vehicle for other concerns. Make sure you do a global scan of all systems, and most importantly, record all the information. Many times the shops will not write down the codes they think that do not affect the transmission. Very big mistake. Always perform checks with a meter on a battery static charge, charging voltage, and voltage dropped on the grounds. This only takes about 2 minutes when you are used to doing it. These basic extra steps will save you hours of work every week. On the road test, make sure you have a scan tool hooked up and recording a movie on the scan tool. Snap-on scanners are recording whenever the scanner is plugged in. This is very helpful because when the problem happens on a road test, you can safely pull over, save the recordings for when you get back to the shop. Please use the correct fluid. It is a must on the Subaru CVT transmissions. I have dealt with a few shops that had to buy new transmissions because they added the wrong fluid when servicing. When buying a unit, make sure you use the correct fluid or they may void your warranty. The Subaru CVT F fluid is clear blue color. Warning, there is also a orange Subaru CVT fluid. It is not interchangeable with the blue fluid. Start the engine and monitor fluid temperature with the capable scan tool. Unit needs to reach 86 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Move the selector lever from park to reverse, then neutral to drive, then drive to neutral, back to reverse, then to park. While the engine is idling, make sure the fluid is circulating within the transmission. So on the back side of the transmission here, in this intermediate housing, you have your fill location and level. So when you pull this plug out, the oil level needs to be with the bottom of this plug. A couple other notes: drain location for the pan and retorque is 37 foot-pounds. The differential drain is a Torx bit T70. The fill level is this bolt or plug right here. It'll trickle out when it is full. You fill the differential on the vent on the passenger side here. Just pull out the vent, and there's a tube here. Just go ahead and fill through there until it trickles out this bottom plug here. This bottom plug, it has like a standpipe, kind of like a 5R55W. It's raised above, and once the oil level gets above that standpipe is when it'll drain out. Proper fluid is a GL5 75W 90 gear oil. Takes roughly 1.4 to 1.5 quarts. On the top of the transmission, there are two main electrical connectors. Subaru calls the black connector the T3 or the B12 connector. It contains the wires for the inhibitor switch and primary speed sensor mainly. Subaru calls the gray connector the T4, and the male is the B11 connector. It contains the wires for the transmission solenoids, temperature sensor, front wheel speed sensors, secondary speed sensor, secondary pressure, and sensor grounds. Also, one thing you need to watch out for is the grounds. Behind these connectors here, you see the bolt in the top right. Ground cables. This is grounds for your valve body and some other sensors that goes to the top of this housing. Very easy for these wires to get pulled on or not to be reinstalled on installation of the transmission. After completing this chapter, please make sure that you watch the sub-chapters for diagnostics. We have made some snap-on scanner videos on normal PID data and explaining the operation. Some of the first video is on lockup operation and live PID data. You will learn that it is normal for lockup duty solenoid to start ramping up around 4 miles per hour, and it can be in full lockup around 12 miles per hour. Also in these videos, we'll explain the operation of the primary pulley and the up and down solenoids. When the ratio is changing from first gear to the overdrive, the primary up duty solenoid will be commanded on. The primary up solenoid adds oil pressure to the primary pulley. The primary down solenoid does just the opposite. It drains oil from the primary pulley. Squealing noise, sound on light acceleration. We found a TSB on this for 2010 to 2012 legacy and outback models. Also, it helps diagnose secondary pressure signal diagnostics. So with the ignition switch in the on position and the engine off, they want you to check the voltage between pin 2 and pin 15. They want to see what the voltage is. You should be about 4.8 to 5.2 volts. If the voltage is outside of the specification range, the TCM is damaged, along with the pulley surfaces of the CVT due to change slippage. Replace both the TCM and the CVT transmission. On pin 17 and 15, they want you to measure the voltage there with the engine off and the ignition switch on. Voltage there should be 0.45 volts to 0.55 volts. So right around half a volt is where they want the voltage to be. So basically what you are checking there is to see what the voltage is with no pressure on that sensor. If the voltages are outside of this range, they're saying the secondary pressure sensor is damaged, along with most likely the CVT chain due to slippage, and they want you to replace the CVT unit. Important: before ordering a new TCM or CVT transmission, perform these same voltage checks at the secondary pressure sensor. They call that the AT6 connector. And the main transmission harness up at the T4 and the B11 connector, ruling out any wiring issues. So what they're saying there basically is to check at the TCM. If you see an issue, you may need to move downstream and see where the signal may be good. The ATX6 connector may be dirty, bad connection, something along those lines. Other common failures, we came up with another bulletin, number 168412. This is talking about the legacy Outbacks, Forester, Imprezas, with the automatic transmission, also including the CVT transmission. They want you to inspect the fluid cooler hose connections, basically for leaks. So they want to see if you see any leaks around the hose. They want you to clean the hose off, run it roughly 5 minutes at 1500 RPMs, and another 5 minutes to confirm that the leak is fixed. Replacing the line clamps if needed. Tcc lockup issues. This is a very big problem. We see this a lot. 2010 to 2012 legacy and outbacks. They have changed the lockup converter. Basically, this boils down to they have changed from a thrust washer into a needle bearing inside the torque converter itself. This is like when you come up to a stop, the engine stalls or kind of chugs and lugs like you didn't push in a clutch in a manual transmission. But this is a lockup issue. Here's the old thrust washer style. They're replacing this thrust washer with the bearing in the newer converters. After replacing the converter, use the correct fluid, of course. Do your relearns. Here's a PID list. There's a lot of different PIDs on here, and the measurements that they display. I'm not going to go through all of them on here, but you're going to see, we have your engine speed signal, your battery voltage, which those are always a great one to take a look at. Your accelerator pedal position, verify that that's working correctly. Your lockup in your all-wheel drive is done in duty cycle. Turbine speed sensor is reading from your primary speed sensor. Transmission temperature temperature sensor. We've had some issues with those, so make sure you check the temperature, make sure it's correct. Manual mode switch on the shifter itself. Move the shifter over and see if it works. Same thing with the up and down tap shifters. Make sure those are working correctly. Of course, always look at your secondary, your primary, and your front wheel speed sensors. Make sure they're working good also. This mainly is for your reference. I'm not going to go over each and every PID on here. So on the scan tool, what this list is, basically on a snap-on scan tool, I've took the list of the trans data 1 from a good working movie, and here's the information from the PID data list, data 1. And here's the data 2 section on the snap-on scan tools. One thing I'd like to point out here, on the bottom of this list, automatic transmission learning, it shows if it's completed or not. Your lockup solenoid is also on the bottom of this list to make sure the on-off solenoid, if you're coming up to a stop, make sure the computer is commanding that solenoid off. You'll see the torque converter TSB a lot on these. Another one I've seen some issues with is the shift step in manual mode, where the shifter's over in the manual gate and stuck over into the manual position, thinking that it's ready for you to use the tap up and down buttons, but you have it in the drive position. This will cause like a no ratio change. So there's a lot of information on these data parameters. Get used to seeing this information and using it the best we can. Here's just this. It's mainly for our handouts, mainly to talk about these are the available codes on this transmission. Transmission rain sensor, the 705. We see that every once in a while. 712 and 713, the temperature sensors, we've seen that quite often. 841, the secondary pressure sensor performance. And the manual switch, we've seen that a few times also. Continuing on the list here, we have basically codes for each solenoid, circuit codes, and some performance codes. And then in the last slide here, we have your lockup solenoid malfunction or performance or circuit codes for your lockup. Transmission relearn procedure needs to be done when changing the transmission, rebuilding the transmission, or replacing TCM, torque converter, valve body, those kind of things. You definitely want to do a relearn after that. Transmission needs to be 104 to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's not within that range, it will not do the relearn. After stopping the vehicle, put it in the park. Apply the electronic park brake. Lift the vehicle up off the ground. Connect your scan tool to it. Turn your ignition switch on position. Engine still running. Turn off all other switches causing electrical load, such as headlights, AC, heated seats, rear defroster. Caution: do not turn off the power to the select monitor or disconnect the data link connector from the vehicle during this operation. Select AT related learning and inspection mode in the transmission diagnostic screen of the Subaru Select monitor. Select AT learning mode in the AT learning and inspection screen. And then follow the display on the Subaru Select monitor screen when working. They'll have you put it into gear, wait a few seconds, put it in neutral, put it into drive. Those kind of relearn procedures through the scan tool. This does vary from your make and model on what exactly it has you do, so you need to follow the instructions on the scan tool itself. Now, a lot of us don't have this Subaru Select monitor. The aftermarket scan tools do also have a lot of these relearns in some of them if the software has been updated. Like in the Snap-on software, you go into functional test, and then you can go into AT learn mode under functional test to do the trans reset. So it's very close to the same as the Subaru, just a different wording. This will conclude our Chapter 5 on the diagnostics for the Subaru lineartronic CVT Generation 1 transmission. We want to thank you for participating in our virtual training solutions powered by ATRA. Until next time, let's keep fixing transmissions together.